Hello, everyone. I'm Melissa McAllister, and you're listening to The Melissa Made Show. Now, for decades, I've dedicated myself to helping women break the cycle of dieting, navigate through all the fads, and change their lives through my nutrition coaching. Now, each week, I'm going to talk about everything from deep nutrition, mindset, self-care, the ideal workout routine, tips on how and why to implement intermittent fasting in your life, my favorite recipes that are not only crowd pleasers, but they're actually healthy for you, and so much more. Now, with small and consistent changes, you can defy aging while living a happier, healthier, and more heart-filled life. I'm so excited to show you it's possible with the right strategies that are so simple to adopt. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Melissa Made Show. Now, today we have a special guest joining us. Her name is Mandy Harvey. And when I say the word trauma, does that instantly make your brain just go, oh, yeah? I don't know too many people that haven't suffered some sort of trauma in their past. And ironically enough, with having Mandy on the show was a perfect timing for me, because as I was flying to Mexico, I had a book on my bookshelf for the longest time that I wanted to read. And so I started diving into it. And he's a naturopath doctor, and he just cannot drill enough about past experiences and past traumas and how they're linked to, you not being able to lose weight and you having leaky gut and gut issues and all this stuff. And so it's a fascinating book. I'm not through it yet. You guys know I got to get through something before I share it. But from what I've read so far, it's fascinating to me. And the clients that I work with, many of them do have past trauma that we do have to address. So now I have an expert on the show to help us kind of uncover that. So she's eager to share her heart-based and unique perspectives. And I know her focus aligns perfectly with our mission of empowering people to thrive as their authentic selves and to be the healthiest versions of themselves. So today, Mandy will be talking about picture perfect and broken, uncover the roots and impacts of perfectionism, and learn how to shift from feeling inadequate to feeling unstoppable. Oh, that sounds amazing. We're excited to dive into this powerful topic with her and explore how we can all embrace our authentic and overcome feelings of inadequacy. So thank you, Mandy, so much for being here with us today.
Thank you. It's such an honor to be here with your audience and talking about this.
Hey, I'm so excited. So I would love for you to just kind of share with the audience what got you started in this. What brought you from whatever happened, if it was personal experience or just a real passion of yours to the work that you do today.
Yes. Well, it started off really with my life. I had a very traumatic childhood. And I tell people I was kind of born into trauma. My mom was a single mother and she was living through her own traumas. And as a result, that meant a chaotic home where she was not emotionally available as much as I would have wanted her to be. Physically, she wasn't there as much because she's working multiple jobs. And also she's living through her own stuff and inviting men into her life that weren't very healthy. And as a result, I was abused quite a bit as a child from those men that were moving in and out of our home pretty frequently. And, for me, I thought my childhood was normal. If you would have asked me, it was like, I didn't know any different. But when I was 14, was really kind of the peak of all of the stuff that had been happening to me as a child. My mom had been remarried, and the man she was married to was very abusive, very manipulative. And I had told someone at school what was happening in my home. And that led to, social workers, that led to investigations, that led to an arrest, and ultimately a restraining order where he was not allowed to, my stepdad was not allowed to be at the home. But not too long after that had happened, he was released and they ended up taking their lives together. And so at the age of 14, my life imploded. in many ways. I had to move. I had to change schools. I no longer had my mom around, like, even though my home was chaotic, children in that situation always have a love for their parents because that's just what they know. But that my life really imploded in that moment. I started therapy right away, trying to deal with the impacts of that childhood. And off and on through my life, I have been in and out of therapy as trauma comes up and as we try to process it. There's no way our systems can handle all of it at once. And so I think there's a big myth around, like, I'm going to go heal whatever is holding me back, or I'm going to go work on this trauma. And we think, we have this idea in our head. And I know this because I've done it in my past. We have this idea of, like, I'm going to go talk to this therapist. They're going to help me work through this. And I'm going to be out in like 3 months. Are we going to be good? And the reality is, the way our bodies hold and store that trauma, it takes a long time for our systems to really start to release it and feel safe enough to start to release that and start to heal it. And so it's been over the course of my lifetime that I've learned and really had my own experiences with healing trauma. And also, because of that, it's a passion of mine really to help guide people through that process and help them really, for once and for all, release what's holding them back. Perfectionism being a really big one, with the people that I work with, and all the ways in which that shows up. Because that, we've all heard it, perfectionism is the root of, prevents us from experiencing joy in our life, but it prevents us from experiencing a lot of other things too. And when we know how and have those tools, we can start to really break down those walls and those barriers and really show up authentically and live our life with much more ease and resilience. So that's kind of how it started.
Well, number one, I kept saying it, but I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. And yeah, I almost feel like I can, like, sign off on the podcast, because just you sitting there with that beautiful smile on your face after all that you've gone through gives people enough hope that maybe are still going through that there is hope, and there is a bright light on the opposite side of all that you possibly could go through. So thank you
100%.
just
Yeah.
for that, for stepping up and being, not only have I been able to help myself, but I want to help other people as well. And I think that's phenomenal. It's funny you say that, because I had a mentor, and she was very big into therapy. And I wait, I think you probably deal with this a lot, where people are like, I don't need therapy. And it's not sure it's going to work for me. But I finally went in, and for me, I struggled with severe birth defects, being teased a lot as a kid. And I always thought that was kind of my holdback. But the more and more therapy that I had, the more we were uncovering how much my father's death, when I was just right before I turned 6, affected, and how I kept going back to my father's death more so than just the birth defects. And I never thought that really, held me back or made me, not be, like you say, the best version of myself. But after going through that for a really long time, and I did EMDR therapy, and I thought that was great as well, was pivotal, really pivotal. And I love that you talk about the perfectionism, because that's my husband as well. Gosh, I just wish we could have done a survey, because I am sure, and maybe you have some statistic, how many, people in general, but just my own audience. I mean, because if I think of, even my husband, the trauma that he has gone through as a child, and how it reflects on who he is today, both good and bad. It's pretty staggering.
It is. I don't have formal statistics, but every person I have worked with has some level of that showing up. I see it a lot more in women, but I know men experience that too. But I do see it in women quite often, this level of perfectionism. And it's funny how it seeps into our lives in really interesting ways. For me, like, I've had this thought, I'm someone who experienced deep perfectionism for a very long time, and it impacted my health. It impacted my ability to thrive. It impacted my ability to be a mother. It impacted my ability to be a good employee. And I have gone through so much to what I felt was really to work on that need to be perfect and to really repair that and heal it. And just about 6 months ago, I was doing yoga, and yoga is a practice that I've done for years, actually, since I was a teenager. It's been something that I have just always been called to. And I was doing a yoga practice, and I thought, oh my gosh, like right now, I'm trying to get into this like perfect position. I'm really focused on it has to be perfect. And I thought, oh my gosh, look at how crazy it is that perfectionism is even trying to get into my yoga routine. And so just having that awareness, I thought, oh, how funny. I'm like, I don't need this to be perfect. It's okay. I don't have to have it look a certain way, but it just made me laugh because I was like, oh, how deep these roots go.
Absolutely. I find myself doing that too. And it's almost a paralysis that you get in your head that if I can't do this perfectly, then I'm not going to do it at all. And
Yes.
that which honestly, I'll be honest with you, and I'm sure we'll probably talk about this, things like yoga or even meditation. Like meditation is very difficult for me because, I expect to be able, look, I'm sitting here right now, Indian style. I expect to be able to sit here Indian style and close my eyes and be able to go off into this never land and clear my mind and wake up feeling completely revived. And if I can't do it like that, then it's not worth doing at all. So getting rid of that perfectionism really allows you to live your life to a fuller extent. If Mandy, you can kind of share with me, because this is what this book really covers as well, is the connection between having trauma in your life and chronic illness, and how it does affect you physically. And even if you really keep telling yourself that these two are separate, and the fact that I can't simply lose weight has nothing to do with the fact that, I may have had some trauma in my childhood. Can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, for sure. So what this looks like, and I like to talk about like even any type of trauma can influence our health, but I really like to focus on and use the example of like early childhood trauma and how this affects us later in life. What happens when we experience a traumatic event is that our body goes through the natural process, our fight and flight process to respond to that stressor, to respond to that major event. So our biology kicks in, our hormones kick in, our stress hormones, our adrenals. We're kind of in that state of in this rush of stress hormones, which are really good. That's our body's way of keeping us safe. And that's exactly what it needs to be doing. But what happens when we experience a traumatic event in childhood, where we might not be able to fight off the trauma experience, the event, we might not be able to run away. Maybe our only response is to freeze or fawn, where we try to people please our way out of it. Our bodies can't, if we're stuck in that place where we can't run, we can't fight, our system can't just automatically turn off the biological reaction of like stress hormones. And so what happens is, if that trauma is occurring over and over again, and that trauma could be a big T trauma like abuse or some sort of big event, or it could be a small T trauma where it's, I don't feel seen or heard. I feel like I'm not enough. I don't feel like I fit in. There's constant bullying. Those things, if we're experiencing them over and over again, our body stays in this chronic state of stress, and it's constantly fighting in this place of hormones, stress hormones. And that's really damaging to our bodies. Those hormones are really good short term, but when they're long term and chronic, it deteriorates our bodies. And what happens, especially in early childhood trauma, is when that child experiences that trauma over and over again, it changes actually the physiology in the body. So now I become quicker to respond to the stress. My body reacts faster and faster and faster. And all of a sudden, my underlying current in my system is just high stress. I'm just there all the time because my body has been attuned to this place of responding so fast. And what happens in that state is that affects. So if we think about stress, when we experience stress, we're not experiencing it in our head, we're experiencing it in our body and in our organs. And if you think about a stressful event, what happens is the blood flow shifts from our digestion, from rest and ease, to shuttling all of the energy to our lungs, to our heart, to our extremities, thinking caveman days, maybe running away from a tiger or something. But our physiology is really trained when we're under stress that we are shuttling all of this energy, all of this blood flow to our heart, to our lungs, and away from digestion, away from the immune system. And so when we're in that chronic state, it starts to affect our digestion because the energy and the place in which the state that our body is in is anti-healing, it's anti-digestion, it's anti-functional immune system. Our immune system starts to deteriorate because of this chronic state of stress. Our digestion starts to deteriorate because of this chronic state of stress. And then over time, we start to develop the health conditions. We start to develop the gut dysfunction or the IBS or the autoimmune conditions. Because if you think about running your car, if you have the pedal to the floor and you're burning through your gas, at some point your car is going to crash. And that's what happens in our bodies is we experience this trauma. And if we aren't able to resolve it and heal through it, in proximity to when it happened, and it's over and over and over, we're in this state of stress, it really affects every part of our body. And all of us are different. We all might have a different weak point in our bodies. So my weak point is my liver. My weak point was my pancreas. I have diabetes as a result. I have, autoimmune conditions. My weak point was my thyroid. Your weak point might be your heart or your lungs or something different. And so that's why it all looks a little different for all of us. But underneath the diagnosis or the name for what's going on, underneath all of it, it's the same kind of inflammation of this stress response that starts to really affect the digestion and the immune system.
And I can imagine right now, so many people are thinking, oh yeah, that's me. It's like, it's not hereditary, having,
Right.
a low thyroid or having, getting, type 2 diabetes or anything like that. You're like, this is happening to me and it's happening to you for a specific reason. And I love that you talk about how chronic stress can really, obviously, really harm your health. It's going to keep you being in that heightened state where these hormones that keep you from resting and repairing, you never get in that state. And then that messes with your sleep. And then that even just messes
Yes.
the next day. You didn't get a good quality of sleep. And then you're going to, make poor food choices because they're comforting and because you're tired. And then all you're thinking in your mind is, I'm weak and I can't seem to get this weight off, or I can't seem to get this diet under control. I'm such a weak person, which is terribly cyclical, because there you are already in this heightened state of stress. And then you're putting yourself down and thinking you're not adequate. and really getting to the root of why your body is just not in that happy, healthy state, where every once in a while everybody gets stressed.
Yes.
Everybody. I mean, we're remodeling our kitchen right now. You might hear the noises. It's very stressful right now.
Yes.
But
Yes.
that's acute stress. It's like you said, the chronic stress where you wake up every single day and there's just this undertone of never feeling completely at ease.
Yeah. And you touched on it perfectly. I think what's important to understand also when someone thinks about like, well, how come I can't lose this weight? Like I've changed my diet, I'm working out, whatever outside things you've done really to do this. There's a story that I love that I heard from Wayne Dyer. And he talked about, he was explaining the story and he said, imagine yourself in your home and you're in the living room and all of the lights go out, the electricity, something happens and electricity shuts down and you're in the dark and you drop your keys. And all of a sudden you're on the floor, you're kind of looking for your keys, but you can't find them. And you look out the window and you notice the street light is on. So you're like, you have this thought of like, well, maybe I'll go outside where the light is and I'll look for my keys. And so he's explaining, okay, so imagine going outside by the streetlight and you're on the ground, you're looking for your keys and you can't find them. And your neighbor walks by and says, hey, Mandy, what are you doing? What are you looking for? And you're like, well, I'm looking for my keys. And so they're like, okay, well, I'll help you. So we're both on the ground looking for our keys. Like we can't find them. And the neighbor says, well, where did you drop them? And I say, well, I dropped them in my living room. And the neighbor says, well, why are you looking out here? They're in the living room. And you're like, well, I thought because the light was here, I could see better. So I'm just gonna, look for them out here. The idea being, how many times do we, look at external things to repair maybe something that needs an internal viewpoint? So meaning when it comes to trauma and health, healing your trauma is just as important as changing your diet, as moving your body, as integrating a be calm to my nervous system, be gentle to my nervous system lifestyle. And that's because trauma doesn't just affect our biology, but it affects our beliefs and it affects our behavior. And so when we have experienced that trauma, especially early childhood trauma or a chronic cycle of trauma, our beliefs start to change. Like, I'm not good enough. I'm not capable. I'm not lovable. I'm unworthy. Imagine all of those beliefs that sometimes I'm sure many of us have had in our life. And then that changes our behavior. Mm-hmm. So what happens is we might get to a point and say, I really need to lose this weight. And so I'm going to change my diet. I'm going to change my lifestyle. But the undercurrent that is running in your system with that stress is, I don't believe I'm worthy enough to be healthy. I don't believe I'm worthy enough to lose this weight. And so we're like, knocking heads here in terms of trying to lose that weight if that undercurrent in our belief system is that I'm not good enough, or I won't be able to do this, or whatever that negative belief is. And so then our behavior starts to also get impacted. So now our behavior might be anti-healing. We might find ourselves being that workaholic or that perfectionism, that we're trying to make everything perfect. So I'm only going to work out if I can make it on my schedule at this time, on this day, during these hours, and I have the right outfit, and the weather is perfect, the sun is shining, I have a friend to go with me, or I'm only going to eat this type of meal plan if I can make sure I get to the grocery store and get all the things, right? Like, how many times do we find ourselves trying to perfect the experience? And oftentimes that behavior of perfectionism or workaholism or whatever is pulling us out of that experience is really kind of a symptom of this underlying current of possible trauma, dysregulated nervous system, chronic stress. And when we're in that place, our system has been attuned to something that's anti-healing. We just will not be able to turn the key and really get over to the other side of that weight loss until we really pay attention to, what is the trauma that needs my attention? How do I help my nervous system really repair and reset and recover so that it can be in a state that is open to healing?
So I have a question for you, because you're the expert. And I'm just thinking, I'm always trying to get in my audience's head. And I feel like there's probably, maybe three different people. First one that are like, everything you just described is me. I am a perfectionist. I won't commit to something unless I can get it perfectly. I'm a huge people pleaser, but I don't feel like I've had any trauma. And then you've got the next person that's like, yeah, that kind of describes me, but I don't know if my trauma was that bad. And then you've got the third person saying, oh, I know this is me. I've lived through hell and back, and I am dealing with these issues, and I would love to deal with my trauma. Am I hitting the ballpark? Are those really kind of the different
Yes.
areas? Okay.
Yes.
And
Yes.
how do you, especially, I guess, maybe the first person that just isn't sure that they've suffered trauma, they're going back in their past and like, kind of like you did, you thought you had a normal childhood, and so far from it. I'm so sorry. And but people, could still be stuck in that, I don't know. How do you get people to really just sit down with themselves and figure out, maybe something, what has happened, if anything has happened, that is holding them back from being the best version of themselves?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. There are, people who have experienced trauma but don't have a memory of it, and who think, okay, I know I didn't experience trauma, but once I get into the work, then those memories start to come up. So there's a possibility that that could be the case where you just don't remember, and that's okay. That doesn't mean you're broken in any way. That's our coping mechanism as a child, and how our brains are developing during such a stressful period.
And Mandy, I don't mean to cut you off, but you are 100%, because when my father passed away, all of the doctors, the counselors and stuff told my mom that I have a mental block of it, because I should, at the age of 6, I have like one memory of my dad when he was mad, and I have one memory of my dad when he was happy and singing, and that is it. And they say it's because I blocked that trauma of remembering my dad, because childhood hurt so much. So
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. And here's the thing. So mentally, we may not have a memory of it, but our body will have a memory of it. So anytime we experience something where it might be familiar to something that happened in the past, we might have a trigger come up physically, like, oh, I feel anxious. All of a sudden I feel really unsafe and I'm not sure why. And sometimes those can be signs of like, okay, something's happening in my body and I don't know why. But that's a key of, okay, I need to learn more or get help to help me uncover that.
Yeah.
In the case of, so that's maybe one category of people. I don't remember it. It probably, there was something that happened. I don't remember it. Another category would be the way we perceive trauma and the way we think about trauma is most often people think about the big things, like there was a big car accident, there was an alcoholic, there was abuse, there was drug use. We think of those big things, but trauma lives on a spectrum. So that's one side of the scale. The other side of the scale could be you went to school every day wearing clothes from like a secondhand store, and you were bullied every day because you didn't look like the other kids, or you were shy and people made fun of you, or you felt like you had such high expectations at home and you could never live up to them and you felt like you weren't good enough. Those are just as traumatic to a child as the big T's. Now, obviously there's, context, and the big T's can create layers and layers, and all of this can, but it's not for us to judge. What I experienced was not enough. What you experienced is what you experienced, and it had an impact on you.
Yeah. And I'm thinking right now, because of the age of social media and, like the online bullying and stuff like that, how much that's going to affect, future adults, the children and the teenagers today, and the expectations that put on themselves to have the Stanley Cup and the Lululemon leggings and stuff like that.
Yes.
I mean, I just feel like it's more heightened than it ever has been, to really kind of help your children now through that. So it's not underlying trauma as an adult that they don't understand why, but really helping your children in today's society understand that those bullies, have no place in your mind. They should take up absolute space.
We all need that digital detox, I think, of like, taking away all the stimulation that we experience in a day and turning it inward, because really what's most important, what will make the biggest impact, is really the relationship we have with ourselves. And that looks like questioning, why do I judge myself in X, Y, and Z? Why am I trying to make this aspect of my life perfect? Why am I always nervous when I go to this place, or when I'm around this person, or when I do X thing? I think really the place in which that can help us on this journey the most is getting into that place of curiosity, which opens up the awareness, which then allows us to see, oh, I have an area here I really need to work on, and I'm going to take action to go do that. But it starts with curiosity, and I think people who say, oh, I don't have that trauma, or I, didn't experience what you did, so I'm sure I'm fine. But the one thing we have to do is take a step back and really assess, be really honest with ourselves and assess, like, okay, if I'm really trying to improve my health and I'm doing all these things, I'm taking all the great supplements, I'm eating the great food, I'm moving my body, but for some reason, I'm not able to lose the weight. For some reason, I'm not able to improve my sleep. I'm not able to do this goal or that goal. Then, the whole point of this conversation really is to say, then there's a missing piece to this puzzle that you're trying to put together for your health. And trauma, underlying unhealed trauma, can be a factor in your inability, in your systems of inability, in your beliefs, in your behaviors inability to really finally find success in those areas. And that should be a component you're incorporating. And if you're like, I know I didn't have trauma, we all experience stress. We all have a nervous system, and we all at some point have gotten to a point where our nervous system is somewhat dysregulated, meaning we're leaning more into the stress and less into the relaxation. So even if you're like, I know I didn't have trauma, then nervous system regulation should be a part of the whole health and wellness protocol at a minimum. Really taking time to notice the things that I'm doing. Is that helping me feel relief? Is that adding to more stress? Am I not able to set boundaries for my time and my energy? Maybe I need to have a conversation with my spouse or with someone at work. All of these things can be factors in our nervous system, which then pulls us further and further away from the place that helps us to heal and thrive in a healthy weight, in a healthy lifestyle.
I wonder, again, you'll have to shed light on this for me. 2 points. The first one is, I wonder if there are those people that were very blessed, even up to the point of listening to this podcast, and they're probably like, this podcast is for me. But there's almost a sense of, and I want to use the word trauma, because guilt can be traumatic, of having a terrible sense of guilt because they've had a very blessed life, and things have come well for them. They had a great upbringing. Money's not an issue. They're in a great marriage. And so they're like, I've never had, so they live with, an underlying stress of, this isn't fair. I'm not, I feel so bad because I don't have, I can't obviously relate to somebody who's had any kind of trauma, and I feel really bad, and that will cause stress in and of itself. Have you come across that?
No, but I could imagine that would add some level of stress for someone. When you were talking about that, the one thing I wanted to point out is, we're talking about trauma, and one of the aspects that can be potentially traumatic is surgery.
Oh,
that we don't think about, right? Like how, the process in which we've had surgery and recovered from surgery, or came out of surgery, went into surgery. That's an area that we experience that can also be traumatic. And so I think the idea is, like, open up our mindset into anything that felt like it affected me. Maybe we take the word trauma out of it, but did I experience something that felt like it affected me, and I wasn't able to respond or recover in the way that I really wanted to? If is it something that identifying with, this is who I am. I experienced this and it really affected me. That can be a source of information for you, a place of curiosity of like, how could this still be running in the background of my life, in the background of my physiology? Does this need some time and attention really for healing? Could that be a helpful component to my life?
And I think you kind of opened the door with my next question, talking about curiosity. So you have, you know, clients or this audience that's listening and saying, okay, I identify with, not being able to get where I want to, as hard as I feel like I'm trying. I realize that, I've had some trauma in my life. And you mentioned to be curious about that. So they're starting to really unwrap things that are going on. It could be a possible cause of why today they are where they are. What other steps do you recommend that people go through once they start really exploring it and they're going, okay, there's a checklist and I'm realizing I've got these things. What's their next steps?
Yeah, I think curiosity is definitely the big one. There's a few questions that Dr. Gabor Mate shared that I love for reflection questions. And they're things like, where do I have trouble saying no? What's the impact on me not saying, or what's the impact on me of not saying, no, this isn't going to work for me? What's the belief behind my difficulty of saying no? And questions like this really get to help us really uncover, where are we outside of our authenticity? So am I not showing up fully in one way or another? And that in of itself can be a stressful event, right? When we're not authentic to who we are and what our needs are, and we can't ask for that's a level of stress that our bodies have to contend with. But when we are in that place of curiosity, for the next step really for me, I think, is understanding and noticing our nervous system in that place of curiosity. So when I wake up in the morning, do I feel energized after my sleep? Do I feel groggy? In the middle of the day, do I feel exhausted? What is my general tone in my nervous system throughout the day? When am I feeling relaxed? What does relaxation even feel like? When's the last time I felt relaxation? What does stress feel like? What do different levels of stress look like? And then it's a matter of really paying attention to our emotional body. So when we're curious, now we're looking at the physiology of where am I holding, what's happening in my nervous system. And then I also like to look at the emotional body. So when I'm stressed, where do I feel that stress in my body? Is that in my chest? Is it in my stomach? For me, my stress, I call it my stress belly. I would get stressed and my stomach would bloat big time. I would hold all of this energy, all of this stress in my belly, and it would be like, oh, I can't eat. It's painful. I'm uncomfortable. I can't focus at work, or I can't focus at home. My stomach hurts. And inevitably, every time I took myself out of that stressful experience and was able to lay down and do some breathing and just come back to me, it was like my stomach all of a sudden flattened. And it was like, oh my gosh, I couldn't, when I made that connection of like, why am I before didn't have that connection of why is my body feeling this way? But when I started to pay attention to my stress, where I'm holding it in my body, and what does that look like? For me, it was this like pregnant belly, stress belly. I was like, oh my gosh, that's stress. That's not like, like I didn't eat something that's, affecting me. That's stress. So once you have that connection, then that gives us some insight into what can I do in my environment to help me calm down. Nervous system regulation techniques, breathing. I've always loved tapping meditations because tapping on the body really activates and triggers the release of that stress from your body. And that was really important for me because I held so much of it in my body.
So you're talking about the physical aspect. I immediately went to, I think a really good indication, besides so many people that I know wake up and they don't wake up like, oh, it's a beautiful day.
The unicorns aren't flying over.
It just doesn't happen. They're either, I mean, it takes everything to get them out of bed, even
Yes.
if they've been in bed for 8 hours or they just wake up just like, I got to go, there's no moment to allow your body to wake up. So, but maybe even massages, like when you're getting a massage and you literally can't lay there and relax during a massage,
Yes.
your mind going a mile a minute, or you can't let go of that tension. Is probably
Yes.
a really good example of holding on to things that you really need to explore and be curious about, because that should be definitely at least one time that you're really able to let go and let your mind relax, or to go to a happy place, or to completely let everything go. And if you can't, that's, I think, would be a really big symptom of there's something
Yes.
there for sure.
The one practice I love to share with people is called the 2% relief. And that, for me, the way I explain this is anytime where we find ourselves, if we're paying attention and have the intention of, I would like to pay attention to when I'm stressed. So you find yourself in a stressful moment. And once you have that awareness, then I invite people to release 2% of that. So what could you do to release 2% of that? Is that like relaxing your hands and like flowing your hands like this? Is that like realizing your shoulders are really high, so you bring your shoulders down, or you move your neck a bit? Is it moving your head? Is it observing what's in front of you? But inviting this like 2% relaxing, 2% release. What is available for me to release? Just 2% of it. And I think the more that we get into that practice of like, can I just release 2% of this? That starts to train our mind and our body into this practice of, oh, I can release a little bit more, and I can release a little bit more. Oh, okay. I can still be in this like stressful meeting or whatever it is, and I can still find some relief in my body. So that's one thing.
Are you ready to learn the secret behind how I continue to be so healthy? Well, it all comes down to science. If you've been listening to my show for a while now, you may have heard me mention something called the MAID diet. Yes, that's right, because I'm so passionate about how learning about the effects that nutrition has on the human body, I always seek to learn as much as I can and apply that knowledge. One of my best learning tools has been self-experimentation. And now in my late 40s, I have to say, I've done a pretty good job. It's hard to find trustworthy, even accurate information in this country. Between the influence of big corporations with monetary agendas, the nutrition labels designed to deceive, and downright misleading information that you were taught in school, navigating food and nutrition with your optimum health in mind can be quite challenging. Take the food pyramid, for example. In an ideal world, I'm sure we would all love to eat pasta and baguettes for every meal, but that's simply not what's best for our bodies, our health, and our longevity. Now, I spent years developing the MAID diet in a way that I wish someone had taught me, and I break it all down in my MAID diet course. People are always asking me what I eat, so we start there. What I eat in a day and which foods are the most beneficial. So think something in between the Mediterranean and the paleo diet. It's a lifestyle plan that incorporates moderate protein, adequate fat, decreased carbs, and an introduction to intermittent fasting. But please, I want you to keep in mind, just because I say decrease carbs, I don't mean decrease carbs in what your body needs. I just mean decrease carbs in what the standard American diet has become. You still get plenty of quality carbohydrates, just not in the mass amounts we have been eating to get us into such an unhealthy state. And of course, we're going to talk about what foods to avoid, because that's just as important. We even talk about how to eat healthy on the go, because let's face it, we're busy and that's just life. And then there's intermittent fasting. I share all of my favorite tips and tricks, and a lot of science are along the way. I could not say enough good things about intermittent fasting, and I'm honestly so surprised more people aren't doing it. You'll also learn how I've learned to balance my hormones and feel my best, because so many women struggle with this. And lastly, we cover the mindset behind making a change, because we all know that your mindset is the key to your success in anything that you do. So if you are struggling with diet in terms of feeling your best, or you are ready to take your health to the next level, I strongly recommend you check out this course. Now, the course is structured in 5 modules, 16 lessons, and a whole lot of research to back everything up. So I want you to visit my website, themaidediet.com or melissamade.com, and you will see a tab for the course. Click on that to get access today and learn why you should be eating this way too.
The other thing I would say is we are, one practice that's really good is to notice where you're not holding stress in your body or you find neutrality in your body. So if I'm holding stress in my stomach and I'm going to focus all my attention there and it's going to get worse and worse and worse, right? I'm just like, oh, I got this stress. But what if I noticed that I don't have any stress in my toes? Actually, my toes kind of feel neutral. If we find that place in our body and we move our attention back and forth, then we start to relax a little bit. Our body starts to move into this place of flow and a little bit more ease. And so I like doing things like that where it doesn't have to be a super big practice where you're marking it on your calendar, Mondays at 2 p.m. I'm going to release my stress, but things where we can do them in the moment that are manageable enough and easy enough really help to retrain our system to find that place and to get back to it. And then the more we do it, it's like going to the gym. We can't, get defined muscles just by one day of lifting weights. We got to do it every day or, as frequently as we can. So this is that same practice is let's do this frequently and let's kind of retrain our system.
And I love that you shared, especially, being studied the gut a lot, that so many people come to me, with the bloats and the cramps and the constipation or the diarrhea, and they instantly, of course, want to do a GI map, or they want to do a food tolerance, and they're spending all this money and all this time trying so hard to figure out what it is that's causing this, thinking that it is an outside source. And one of the reasons why I started reading this book is, I'm thinking of clients that I have, and we have gone through the gamut. And they have even gone, multiple tests and just can't figure out. So the next question now is digging deeper and trying to figure out if there's some past trauma that's really holding them back. And it really has nothing to do with their diet, so to speak, because they'll tell you that, everything's great. And they'll tell you that, I'm exercising, I'm sleeping well, I'm taking my supplements, I'm, eating great. And it's like, blah.
Yes. There's a great study it's the ACEs study, stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. And it was a study done in the mid 1990s with Kaiser Permanente and CDC. And it is actually still going on. It's one of the largest studies that have ever been done. They started it with 17,500 adults. And what they did was they asked these adults to fill out this questionnaire. So initially there were 10 questions. Since there have been more that have been added. But they're questions like, from the ages of 0 to 18, did you experience any of these things? And so on there will be questions like, did you have an abusive parent, or did your parents divorce? Did you experience abuse or neglect in your home, et cetera, et cetera. And there's kind of categories of these questions that are on this quiz, and you tally up. So if I experienced abuse in my childhood, that's 1 point. If I experienced my parents divorcing, that's a point number 2. So you tally up all your points and that becomes your ACE score. And what they found was that the correlation between adverse childhood experiences and autoimmune conditions later in life was as strongly linked as smoking and lung cancer. And there's all sorts of data around this study that shows, if you have, I think it's 4 or more ACEs, you have a 70 to 80% greater likelihood of developing an autoimmune condition during your adult years. And it goes with the understanding of what we've been talking about here is the trauma really affects our biology. It impacts our immune system. It impacts our hormonal system. And so the more we're in that stress, it deteriorates. And now we've developed these health conditions. But it's a great study. And for people who are like, well, I don't know, this might be a good place to go check out. And so you can Google ACEs study. You can Google ACEs quiz, but I think there's a website called aces2high.com that you can go to that has some information about the study and the quiz. But I share that and with caution of like, I know there are people who tend to be that perfectionist and want that data and want all the information to really figure out what they're going to do with it. This is like getting a blood test, and saying, oh, my vitamin D levels are a little too low. I should probably incorporate more vitamin D in my diet. This is like that. This might tell you like, oh, maybe you have a high ACE score. And that's just an indicator of like, that can be another element to my health and wellness plan that help support me long-term. But it's fascinating data. I love that there's actual data out there that shows that there is this big correlation between these two things.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that you're not alone kind of a thing.
Yeah.
On top of that. And so you've been an absolute wealth of knowledge, really helping people identify, this, and you do it in such a wonderful, sweet way. But I would love to know more specifically how you help people. How would, somebody who's like, yep, checked all these boxes and I'm interested in what Mandy does and how Mandy helped me through this.
Yes. Well, I would like to share, if you go to stopyourbrainbully.com, that's a site where I share a free gift. It's like a mini course that walks you through when you have perfectionism or have this kind of inside bully behind, in your mind telling you, oh, I need to do this, or I should do that better at this or whatnot. That brain bully can really affect our health and wellness journey. So there's a free gift there. It's a mini course. There's 4 videos, a workbook, and it walks you through all of my processes and techniques and methods for how to rewire this brain bully. But you also learn more about me there and who I am. But yeah, in terms of how I work with people, I work with people one-on-one. I have a bunch of courses and free gifts available for people to check out and learn about my methods in really recovering your health, healing from trauma, and living your best self. I am on Instagram at Mandy L. Harvey, and my website's mandylharvey.com. But I do one-on-ones. I also, if locally here in Colorado, I host 3-hour guided hiking and healing experiences where we take all of this in nature and we use the power of nature to really heal from the inside out.
I love that. I think that's great. And so I assume you loving yoga and stuff like that. Do you really find that I'm asking for a friend. Do you really think, because I'm sitting here stuttering because I know what you're going to say. I'm the girl who gets in the gym and strength training and I get my walks in every day, but I really struggle with the calmness, of meditation or yoga or anything that causes me to be still or to be with my own thoughts. I assume that's a very important part of healing.
Sitting with ourselves in one way or another is very important. You can achieve that same thing on a walk. If you're being mindful enough, the headphones aren't in and we're paying attention to what's around us and we're using our senses to really tap into ourselves, we can do the same thing on a walk. And I know some people are very triggered by yoga. Some people really love it. Some people have a hard time with meditation. I think what's most important is just finding that place of stillness in whatever form works for you. Yoga for me is great. I find that I'm able to use yoga to just release whatever is in my body. So I kind of take my head out of it as much as I can. And it's not a practice of like, as we talked about 6 months ago, I was like, I need to be perfect. But for the most part, I try to let my mind just go and just kind of let my body flow in whatever way it needs to move the energy, to get things out. But I also love hiking. I love being out in nature. I love sitting under a tree and just observing and being aware of my surroundings. All those things can be just as powerful as someone who sits in their cross-legged position doing a meditation. I think it just whatever works for you in finding that stillness. But I think that should definitely be a goal for anyone's health and wellness journey and healing their traumas and tapping into your intuition, tapping into what's the innate wisdom within my body. We all have this amazing universe within ourselves that can guide us, that can support us, that can give us the information we need, but we just have to listen to it, and we have to learn how to understand the language of it, and that's one of the things I really love working with people on, is helping teach them the language of their own nervous system and how to interpret it, how to uncover it, how to support it, and how to work with it in your life so that you can use it as a benefit instead of being like, oh, I'm so stressed. But yeah, that stillness can come from anywhere. You might even find it washing the dishes. I don't, like the places where we can get our head out of the game for as much as we can and just tap into the present moment. That's the power.
Yeah. And as a nutritionist, and I'm sure that you recommend this as well, especially before and during eating. You want to sit down, get parasympathetic.
Yes.
Take a couple deep breaths.
Yes.
I obviously, gratitude, the book that I'm reading, he talks about the importance of before you go to sleep and or when you wake up to talk about what went right in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And to
Yeah.
yourself in that mind space of what went right and what you accomplished, even if it was, I took a 15-minute walk today, to pat yourself on the back for the accomplishments that you made, especially if there's that perfectionism. So I think that's
Totally.
huge. Now I'm putting you on the spot and you may not have anything, but I would love to end this on a positive note. Do you have, obviously besides you yourself, you are enough of an inspiration for, working with trauma, but do you have any success stories or anything that you can share for people that are like, that could possibly feel like, I don't need one more thing on my plate. Is this really worth it? I'm just going to keep trudging along and do the best that I can. And I'll do what I've done for 30 years and put this on the back burner. Anything you can say?
Yes. Oh my gosh. So I'm gonna call her Sally. That's not her name, but she it was such an inspirational experience to work with her, and she had an incredible success story. So she came to me with hives all over her body, major rash all over her body. And she's a woman who's in her 60s, mid 60s. And I was like, she'd been on the GAPS diet and she had been doing it herself, and she started it because she noticed she was having some reaction to food. Never had that before. All of a sudden she was having reactions and like, what is this? She learned about GAPS. She started doing it herself. And after a year and a half of being on GAPS, she had restricted her diet to 5 foods.
Oh, goodness. Poor thing.
Yes. And was eating a ton of eggs, was eating like homemade yogurt. There was 3 other things that she could, a little bit of chicken. But like her diet was
Big,
small. It was tiny. And so she came to me, she's like, I got this rash. It's hurtful. I don't know what to do, how to fix it. And so we took the eggs out of her diet, and the rash cleared up very quickly. And so we were like, okay, that's interesting. And so we started doing this rotational diet to try and get more foods back into her world, right? And slowly but surely she started to do that. But in the process of working with her health really recovered when we started to understand her health history, which included looking at her childhood. And there was one moment in her childhood so she was not someone who would eat any kind of animal meat, and that was fine when we were finding other ways to get protein. But in uncovering her health history, I learned that she lived on this farm and she had made friends with one of the animals, and that she didn't feel close to her family. She didn't feel close to her siblings. This was like her friend. This was her best friend. And eventually that animal ended up being dinner one night, and it was very traumatizing for her, very traumatizing. And it just set her down this path of, I don't have any friends. I'm alone. My family doesn't love me. My family doesn't care for me. And they're forcing me to eat my friend. And that was so traumatic for her that it really changed the course of how she took care of herself, how she nourished herself, what her relationships looked like. So in every instance, the underlying tone for her was, I'm not lovable. And so she would overpour, take care, try and do all these things to gain this love. In the time that she came to me, she was in a place in her marriage where she wasn't feeling loved. She was trying to take care of a sister who had cancer and didn't feel appreciated, and was pouring herself out, and realizing like her diet was so tiny. She had all these, rashes and health issues. And so incorporating that into the experience of healing meant we started to really work on her nervous system as it related to the food she was eating, because she had such a story around, I can't eat this because of that. I can't eat this because of that. And some of it definitely was true, physiology wise, but the undertone of that physiology was this experience she had that she had never talked about, that she had never healed. So we incorporated that into the experience and the protocol. And lo and behold, 6 months later, she's able to eat a variety of foods, and she's feeling so much more confident and grounded, and like the brightness in her skin just started to shine, like she just looked so healthy and felt so different about the food and the relationship she had to her food and the relationships she had around herself. She felt more confident to have tough conversations and speak up for her needs. And so that for me was just like, my heart exploded watching her, because for this woman for 60 years went through her life not feeling a certain way. And after really incorporating this into her life and her protocol, it shifted everything for her. And so that, I would say, is a great example of anyone should incorporate this into their life, because it has such a transformational experience.
That was beautiful. And I literally teared up because I'm a huge animal lover. I can understand that. I can understand that. Thank you. That's beautiful and good for her. You always know someone could have had that, that healing 30 years prior, but her living her best life now is
I know
enough for people to go, okay, and obviously time frame, you said about 6 months. Some people, it could be a matter of something really quick uncovering or it taking a really long time, but knowing that every single day that you're putting emphasis on healing, past experiences and coming to terms with it and learning to love yourself despite what happened to you is every day it's worth it. You're worth it.
Yes.
So I really appreciate you being on the show and sharing all of this. And I haven't had anybody like you on the show yet. And I was super excited because I do know that this is a big deal and just something that I'm starting to learn about. And I learned a lot from you today. And I'm grateful to know you now and have you in my life.
I know, I'm grateful too. Thank you so much. This has been such a wonderful conversation.
Yeah, you're welcome. And so you guys, please follow Mandy and tell me the website again.
StopYourBrainBully.com.
StopYourBrainBully.com. We'll put that in the show notes. And I love that. And going to take a look at it myself. And thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome. And as always, you guys, I hope you go or wake up feeling prepared and that you go to bed feeling proud. Have a great day. Wow, we've reached the end. But before I leave you, I'd love to hear from you. After all, it's not every day that someone reaches out and asks for your opinion. And to me, your opinion does matter. So please share this episode with anyone that you think needs to hear this message. And remember to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. My name is Melissa McAllister, and until next time, thank you for being your own health advocate.